Music is the
Hello, everybody. Obviously, I'm not Bill, but I'm Tyler Henderson. I'm the operations manager, and I wanted to go ahead and introduce our two speakers here. This is our 1:30 session, Who Can Speak for Black Appalachians, inquiry-based learning workshop presented by Shaniqua Robinson and Helena Sands. This interactive session will use inquiry-based learning to explore who holds the authority to speak for Black Appalachians. Participants will analyze historical sources and engage in critical discussion. I've had way too much coffee. Guided by educators Shaniqua Robinson and Helena Sands. So, let's go to the
Hi, I'm muted on the other end. So, my name is Helena Sands. I'm with I'm a TA at the University of Kentucky getting a PhD.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shaniqua Robinson, and I am not only a Mount Sterling native, a Montgomery County girl, but I am the executive director of the Association for Teaching Black History in Kentucky at Berea College. And I am so excited, Helena and I are both really excited, we're both former teachers, to kind of share a little bit of our space with you. We're clearly not performers. We have no, well, let me speak for myself, I have no artistic talent, not a singer, not a poet, but we want to share with you the art of teaching and how we take these stories, these untold stories, specifically in the lesson that we're going to model for you today of Black Appalachians, and how we can introduce these stories into the space of K-12 education. So we're going to go on a little journey together, looking out at the room. It may have been a long time since some of us have been in a high school classroom. So fancy us today as we take you on a journey through a high school lesson centered around Black Appalachians. And so today I'm going to talk really quickly about the Association for Teaching Black History in Kentucky, the work that we do. And then we are going to, Helena is going to share her expertise on inquiry and what that looks like in the K-12 space. And then, like I said, we're going to go very quickly through a lesson together and engage in conversation together to kind of come up with perhaps not the same answer, but an answer to the question, who can speak for Black Appalachians? So again, my work is at the Association for Teaching Black History in Kentucky. Our work is centered around working with K-12 teachers all across the state. We're housed at Berea College, but our reach is all over the Commonwealth. We want to collaborate with teachers to create lessons that center these marginalized voices so that they can share those lessons with their students. And also we really want to celebrate the work that teachers are doing already and support them however we can so that that work can continue. So though I'm housed at Berea College, our governing board is Berea Kentucky State University, the Muhammad Ali Center, and the Thomas D. Clark Foundation. So all of us work together to ensure that these stories are told and that folks get this information. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. We would love to have everyone involved with the Association for Teaching Black History in Kentucky. So if you have your phones, we have a QR code here, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom of our very long homepage, there is a place where you can subscribe to our newsletter. We would love to share with you information about the work that we do, and you can kind of think about different ways that you can plug in based on the work that you do in your own space. So that's there. I see some folks with their phones out, so thank you. Unfortunately, you just missed the October newsletter that went out yesterday, but we got you for November. So, we're both social studies teachers, and the narrative is always, oh, social studies class is so boring, history class is so boring. How many of you all had that experience in school? Jada was like, yes, me. Yeah. Yeah, it's really difficult to engage students, K-12 students, in history. The question is always, well, why do I need to learn this? Why is this important? This is really boring. I don't want to talk about Daniel Boone anymore. He's been dead for ages. Why do I need to learn this? So a really important piece of our work is the relevancy piece. So thinking about how we as educators can create lessons, can create this curriculum that engage all students. So the teachers that we have engaged in our association really range from, we have folks in Eastern Kentucky, Northern Kentucky, Western Kentucky. So thinking about how we can engage all students in all 170 districts in our state. And so we really hang our hat on the LeGarrette King framework for Black historical consciousness. And so, not getting too far into the curricular nitty-gritty, but this framework really ask us to think about how we present the stories of Black history. So I mentioned that I was a Montgomery County native. I went to school here. A lot of times, I was the only Black kid in class. And so whenever the teacher would get to the civil rights movement or had to talk about slavery, I always felt this shame a little bit. I feel like my white counterparts were always kind of looking at me like, Shaniqua, is this true? Is this the experience of your family? Like, I felt like I was the representative in that space, right? So we don't want that for students, right? So through this framework, we are looking to tell stories through 8 different lenses, right? Traditionally, we really lean a lot into power, oppression, and anti-Blackness. We tell the story of slavery, we tell the story of marches, we tell the story of sit-ins and all these things, which are crucial pieces of the story, but they're not the whole story, right? So thinking about how we can share stories of Black joy, Black agency, how we can talk about life in West Africa prior to Black bodies being stolen and brought to the New World, right? So, and also talking about Black futurism, imagining what the future could look like for Black people beyond. So, sorry. So with that, we are going to, on your tables, you should have at least 2 folders. I wasn't really expecting a crowd this big, so we're pleasantly surprised, but we're a little low on folders. You have the document that you need to go through this inquiry with us today, and we hope everybody is sitting, I think everybody's sitting with at least somebody to engage in these conversations today. And don't worry, it's not for a grade. There's no right or wrong answer. So please just have fun and have conversations, and I'll pass it on to Helena.
Yay. So, is this one working? Sweet. It's like, let's try the wireless, see how it goes. So a lot of the work that I've been doing for my PhD revolves around the idea of inquiry, which, who in here is an educator, would consider themselves an educator? Cool, sweet, I love it. It's so much easier. Okay, so for inquiry, this is a component that is put into a lot of the Kentucky state standards now, specifically with social studies. It's based on the C3 framework, which comes from the National Council for the Social Studies. So basically like our fake governing body for all things social studies. The framework for it emphasizes disciplinary concepts and practices that support students as they develop the capacity to know, analyze, explain, and argue about interdisciplinary challenges in our social world. So that's the fancy definition of it. What we basically mean by that is we want students to kind of get messy and get their hands on documents and be able to actually argue a point. So we call them all claims. We will have a supporting question that helps you answer a compelling question. A compelling question is something that should not be easy to answer. You should have to have sources to look at it, and there should be multiple different perspectives and ways that you can answer it. There's no right or wrong answer as long as you're using sources. So inquiry is not me standing up here, you guys being students having to take notes while I'm talking, aka the most boring type of lecture that you can have. It's supposed to be a hands-on activity, but when I say hands-on, it's not supposed to be you just making a diorama and doing a little art project. Art project as in like nothing that actually comes with substance from social studies. It's just like you can look at a picture and recreate a picture. It's also not just looking at a textbook and reading from a textbook. Like it should have something that is more hands-on for students that is going to actually get them thinking about different perspectives. So on the association's website, if you went to educate and then you went to high school, there are a bunch of different high school lessons that are all based in this. If you actually pull them up, they're all gonna look like this and have some topic at the top of it. I had literally added this in like an hour ago because I realized that you guys would probably be in love with Module 5, which is about folk music and talking about how the African diaspora influenced folk music in Appalachia. We also have Black abolition, horse racing, and Jim Crow, because obviously Kentucky's going to be obsessed with all things horse racing. Sundown Towns, intersectionality, and civil rights movement. And the one that we're going to be looking at today relates to Black Appalachia and the phrase Affrilachia in general, and just dissecting that actual phrase, with the main question being who can speak for Black Appalachians. So a compelling question is supposed to be, once again, something that's going to cover a broader thing. I consider it like the top of a table, and then the legs of the table are going to be the supporting questions that we'll look at that help you to answer this main compelling question. For the Black historical consciousness, the main part of this framework that we're going to look at is Black historical contention, which basically says that while we recognize that there is a lot of Black joy in the world, we still need to understand that not everything is going to be perfect, and there's still going to be disagreements. There's not one monolith when it comes to being Black in the world, so we need to understand that there's going to be different perspectives that come into it. For this specific thing, we are going to have the students engage with question, tasks, and sources about the socio-historical context of Black Appalachian community and the criticism and benefits of the Affrilachian movement in terms of authenticity and representation. So this is a lot of words on here. In front of you guys, you should have something that looks like this. Did you all get that? I apologize for the printer being silly at the University of Kentucky and printing incorrectly for part of it. But the main thing you look at, it has the supporting questions on here. So if you cannot read the top little section, it does have them listed again at the bottom, because I know this is really small font for you to look at. So the supporting questions that we have are: what defines Black Appalachian culture and history? How has the Affrilachian movement contributed to the visibility of Black Appalachian identity? And what criticisms have been made against the Affrilachian movement regarding authenticity and representation? All inquiries are going to start with a hook or an opener. So for this, if you were actually teaching this in a classroom, the way that we would explain it is having students basically discuss what the terms representation and then cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation mean, and have them actually just discuss in groups. Due to this being 45-ish minutes, we're not going to fully go into that, but it does have, once again, on the website for the association, it has all of the different ways that you can have those types of questions. And then usually with inquiries, once they get through the supporting questions, it's going to end up with creating a claim to answer that the main compelling question, and then end with some type of knowledge building or civic action. So for this one, students would examine the diverse communities in their own region, considering the different groups, and seek to make diverse experiences more visible. So that's just the overview of what we're going to look at. So for supporting question 1.
So again, this lesson is for high school students, and understanding that some of the students perhaps don't even know that there are, or that there were, even Black people in Appalachia, right? So understanding kind of our entry point here is getting students to understand that perhaps the traditional definition of Appalachia maybe needs some re-examining, right? So thinking about, oh, there were actually Black people in this space, so what was their story? So a lot of us in this space are familiar with the term Affrilachia. We've read the poetry by some of the Affrilachian poets. We've read books, all of these things. But understanding that students perhaps don't have that frame of reference and don't have that background knowledge, so we're starting at a really low place for them. So with each inquiry, as Helena said, there's a big compelling question, and our big compelling question is, who can speak for Black Appalachians? And so to build students' capacity to answer that big compelling question, we're gonna kind of break it down into these supporting questions, right? So these smaller bite-sized pieces. So on day 1 of this inquiry, mind you, an inquiry can last like 5 days, and we're gonna do it in 45 minutes today. So on day 1, we are going to look at this supporting question: what defines Black Appalachian culture and history? And with each of our compelling questions, students are given sources to look at, because I don't want to spoon feed the students, right? Like, I don't want them to take my definition or take my thoughts of what Black Appalachian culture and history is. I want them to look at the sources and come to their own conclusions. So in your folders, you should have a packet that I think is green at the top, and it says sources on it. And we are going to look at source 1.1. Yep, source 1.1.
Which they're all numbered in the top corner.
And that source is an article, and it's titled How Black Poets and Writers Gave a Voice to Affrilachia. So does everybody see that? Y'all have it? Okay.
Which I do also want to say, for these supporting questions, besides the third one, they all have multiple sources with them. So we are only looking at one for supporting question 1, just so you guys can kind of like understand how it would work in a classroom, because supporting question 2 and 3 are going to be more you guys driven. So just as a heads up, this is not the only source that we would have given students. We would have given them 4.
And we don't have time for 4 sources
Nope, we do
today.
not have time for 4.
So I want to give you all maybe like 5 minutes or less to skim this article, okay? So you kind of have an idea of what we're talking about here. And as you're skimming the article, keep the supporting question in mind: what defines Black Appalachian culture and history? If you finish like a minute or 2 early, maybe you'll have a conversation with the people at your table. In the teacher world, we call that a turn and talk. Maybe you'll turn and talk to your neighbor. And then we can have like a really brief discussion on kind of what you all are thinking as an answer to this supporting question number 1. So 5 minutes or less, skim the article. If you have time, turn and talk, then we'll talk as a whole group. So actually, I see folks kind of wrapping up just a little bit. And if you're not finished, that's totally fine. Does anybody, I can bring the mic down. Helena's going to bring the mic down. Does anybody kind of want to share out their ideas about the supporting question 1, what defines Black Appalachian culture and history.
Sorry. Good morning again. I love playing school, so thank you for this opportunity. So things that I noticed at the beginning of this article is offering two types of sources that in educational spaces might have a kind of authority, like the dictionary and like a book that has been widely disseminated and depending on what spaces you're in, has been critiqued in the region. So I think that in terms of what this article, the argument this article is making even about sources, what I love is that we begin with these two texts that are often revered. I remember being in school, and if I didn't know a word, being told to go to the dictionary, or like as a young person, my aunt would always tell me to go to the dictionary because it had authority. What I love about this article is that it starts with those two sources, but I am counting 4 other places that I can look, and not just places, but the sources are people. They are people that have collections and artists. They are people that also have specific histories in this region. So even in the structure alone, I don't see the word Affrilachia on this page other than the title. What I see are examples of Black people, Black artists in Appalachia, and I have an invitation, if I don't know who any of them are, the same way that I was told to go look up words I didn't know in the dictionary, I have to look up who these people are to know how are they connected to the region.
Yeah. I feel like that's a good point, the noting of the sources, the quoting of the sources. But also, I think that the article also shows how the definition is limited in the dictionary because there are other ways to be impoverished, or other ways that definition can be looked at and layered that aren't really explained in the dictionary.
Yeah, I think that the kind of multifaceted piece is what we want students to walk away with. So what is the traditional definition of Appalachian? Like when we think of Appalachia, we have a very specific image, right? But kind of challenging that with, okay, so what about Black Appalachian culture? What does that look like? So really giving students something to grapple with and something to think more deeply about. So that's supporting question 1. So on the next day, we will say, great, you all did a really great job of defining Black Appalachian culture. Let's kick it up a notch, students.
Let's do something a little harder.
And let's bring in another word. Maybe you all have never heard this word before. So let's think about the word Affrilachia. And I would be like, what do you think the word Affrilachia means? And they would be like, Ms. Robinson, it is a combo of Africa and Appalachian. They would not say that. It would take them forever to get there. So we would get there slowly. But supporting question 2 is, how has the Affrilachian movement contributed to the visibility of Black Appalachian identity? So we are now operating under the assumption that prior to the Affrilachian movement, perhaps there was an issue of visibility in Appalachia around Black people living there. So for this one, the sources that we have several sources for this, and we have 4. I'm not going to ask you all to read 4 sources, but thinking about this supporting question 2, we would ask that you all take a look at Frank X. Walker's Affrilachia, since he was our guest of honor yesterday, and then maybe select one of the other 3 poems that you see there. So 2 poems tops in about 5 minutes or less, and we'll come back together and kind of think through this second supporting question.
Which, while you're going over that, there are some guiding questions for you, which I'm just gonna say out loud, they're not on here. But think about who the poet is, what is their connection to Appalachia, which should be on the sources. In that little blurb, it has who they are, little biography about them, why might relate. What themes, concepts, or ideas are central to the poem? What story are they trying to tell you about themselves, about the region, about Kentucky? And are there any common themes across the poem? And this is a super, please mark all over the poems. Do what you want to do. If you have a pen, go crazy on annotating.
And so this is source 2.3, so compelling question 2, looking at that third source. All right, those of you that have, for perhaps the 100th time in your life, or maybe the first time in your life, read Affrilachia just now by Frank X. Walker. Does anybody want to share thoughts on how that poem perhaps connects to supporting question 2 about how the Affrilachia movement contributed to the visibility of Appalachian identity? I particularly love the line that says, "Yet still feeling complete and proud to say that some of the bluegrass is black." That's my favorite part of the poem.
So speaking to Frank S. Walker's Affrilachia poem and the term Affrilachia, I think it's kind of like the power of having a name. Like the first way that we learn to identify each other is by seeing each other first and then assigning a name to that person. So for younger folks, when I've taught this before, I ask them, like, why is it important for you to have a name? It's so that you know how to respond to someone. It's so that you have an identity. And I think the power of this poem and the power of the term is just giving people a name and giving people something to identify with.
So this idea of name and place is really important. Thank you.
Anybody else have any benefits?
So how about one more person? Oh, was your hand? Okay, great.
The images in all of the poems are common images that when I read them, I know exactly what they're talking about, and I can see it, and that makes me feel seen. So that contributes to visibility.
So like shared community, shared
Shared
space.
experiences.
Yes, shared experiences, yeah. Anybody want to speak to one of the other poems that you may have read that kind of contribute to the visibility of Black Appalachian identity? Okay, cool. So Helena was a high school social studies teacher. I was an elementary school social studies teacher. One thing they have in common is kids across the board love some drama, right? They love to be brought into drama.
It's true.
And so we like to bring the drama to the classroom as teachers. We have to continuously entertain these kids, or we're gonna lose them, right? So bringing in some drama with supporting question 3. We're looking at another perspective because with inquiry, we don't want to present just one perspective. We don't want students to think just one way about a topic. So supporting question 3 is, what criticisms have been made against the Affrilachia movement regarding authenticity and representation? So we have source 3.1, so you'll want to flip through your sources. And if you all are bored at home and you all want to read through all these sources, you are welcome. You have them all. So we have an excerpt from the Harlan Renaissance by William Turner. And this source offers a counter viewpoint to the term Affrilachia. So same thing, I'll give you all just a few minutes to skim. Don't feel like you have to read every word. This one's a little longer. To skim this source, think about the question, the supporting question, and then we will go around, have a couple voices to kind of share out. And then we're gonna wrap up because we're about out of time. So.
I love it.
The students love being messy.
That's why there's one source for, like, there's literally only one source for this because it's students. Y'all, by the way, make sure you read the last section of it specifically, where it says, who do the Affrilachian poets represent, if you would like some more drama. Okay, y'all, if we can kind of come back to center. Can anybody just say any criticisms that they've seen for this movement based on this reading?
So, unpopular opinion in that this is my experience. Outside of certain spaces, I don't really hear people use the term Affrilachia, right? And I would not necessarily check a box that said Affrilachia, but I would check the box that says Appalachian, okay? So I relied on my group members, because I'm that group member that didn't do the homework, but likes to talk. So Turner's criticism is relative to what we see. In that my experience in Kentucky has been, I've not been black enough for some people, and I've been too black for others. So when you come to splitting the hairs of Affrilachian or Appalachian, is it within us to pick apart how another person sees themselves or identifies? We can be Affrilachian and we can be Appalachian, because at the core of that, it's a culture. It's a geographical dot on a map, and there are certain values that we share. So, you know, that is Mr. Turner's experience. And being a person who's from the middle portion of Kentucky, I don't take kindly to people being like, oh, well, you're from over there. Because it's not about your proximity to the Appalachian Mountain region. It's what you've seen, it's what you've experienced, it's what you've embodied, right? So I think it's unfair to criticize. It's also the difference between, my grandfather called us colored, because we are, in comparison. And then some people prefer being called black, and then some people are African American. So it's a label, it's a word. Take ownership of it however you like, but what I'm looking for is, do you embody the values or the principles that I associate with this space, with this people, and with this culture? And the fact that you want to take a lot of time picking apart who is or who isn't, that says to me, as our kind governor of Kentucky said, you ain't from here.
I love your unpopular opinion. Thank you for sharing. Yes. Anybody else want to share out? So again, these are the topics that we want our students to grapple with and to wrestle with. We don't want them to easily come to a certain conclusion. So, okay. So as we kind of wrap up here, because we're 3 minutes over.
So the main compelling question, once again, is who can speak for Black Appalachians, which I feel like you've kind of answered a little bit for how there's different perspectives and different ways to answer this question off the sources. So what I would have my students do is create a claim, which is a stance that you have backed up with evidence. Main thing is you want to have it backed up with evidence from one of the sources that we have to answer the question, who can speak for Black Appalachians. What I like to do sometimes is to kind of let it sit and feel sticky and feel weird, because it should for these types of questions, because there's so many different perspectives you can have on it, and not give an answer to a student ever, because it all should just be what the student's interpretation of the sources is, especially when it comes to something that is, I mean, it's poetry, it's art. There's going to be a million different interpretations that you can have on something. So what we kind of decided was to not give an answer to you guys for who can actually speak for Black Appalachians, because that would be then me speaking for somebody else, right? So I don't want to do that. Shaniqua doesn't want to do that. So we want you guys to just feel the awkward and feel the weird of doing an inquiry.
So thank you all for coming back to high school just for 45 minutes.
Thank you.
You all got it.
A's all around.
Obviously, you had not prepared for this number of people, so we want extra copies. How can we get some extra packets?
So would it be helpful if could I email Jordan?
That's fine.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, all right. Because like you said, you had the unique opportunity of having some of the people, and I'm just gonna do this, not just Frank X. Walker, but you have the Jordan family here. This is Eric, the son of Norman Jordan, who was also in that handout. So also, let me just say this. I want to share with you the work that I've been doing with the Affrilachia Artist Project. And I have a handout on the first symposium, which was at the University of Kentucky, that you can have and use that as a resource with all the names of the participants that came back that long ago. So we can share information back and forth. Because what you're doing is what we're going, I'm just going to tell you, what we're going to be doing in the 13 states, in all of these high schools, as there's pushback against curriculum. We're going to tweak it, we're going to use it, because why are we going to even try to reinvent the wheel? It's right here with examples that we have, and you might not have known it, but we're ready for partnership.
I am also ready for partnership, so I am glad to be in this space.
And we're glad your parents are here too.
Yes, those are my parents.